This fall, bring the beauty of the Rabbit Room into your own community with House Moot. It's a self-hosted gathering where your living room, church, or backyard becomes a place for shared stories, songs, and sacred conversations. With recorded sessions, recipes, activities, discussion questions, and a gathering guide, we'll set the table for you. All you have to do is bring the guests. Get everything you need to host your own House Moot at rabbitroom.com/housemoot.
In this book and in this conversation, if need was personified and standing on a stage, we could talk about, the color of its hair or the size of its shoes, but we could also talk about the attribute of hospitality that's in it. And so realizing that need is an opportunity for us to walk together into something great.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Kevan Chandler is a remarkable man. A degenerative muscle disease has made him altogether reliant on others for his daily care. So he has invited friends into his life, deep into his life, making his need a nexus for community and joy. For Kevan, need is an opportunity for community, an opportunity to love and care for those who love and care for him. Besides reminding us that we all need each other, Kevan's life gives courage not to hide our need. Kevan's new book, co-authored with his friend Tommy Shelton, is The Hospitality of Need, how depending on one another helps us heal and grow together. It was my pleasure to talk to Kevan Chandler and Tommy Shelton in this episode of the Habit Podcast. Kevan Chandler, Tommy Shelton, I'm so glad to have you on the Habit Podcast. I'm excited about your new book, The Hospitality of Need.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Kevan, we'll start with you. What is this book? And what is The Hospitality of Need?
Yeah, so this book has come out of a lifelong experience of inviting people into my needs as a person with disabilities, in a wheelchair, needing a lot of help with a lot of stuff to make my everyday life possible. And so the shortest way to explain the book is it's a series of examples, both my own and others, about how inviting people into your need can foster deeper relationship and help us to heal and grow together.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you, as a person with disabilities, you have a degenerative muscle ailment. And you, as you said, you require a lot of care, and you get a lot of that care from friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of it, actually. I've been doing it that way for all of my adult life. And early on in there, I used, government funding to pay a few people to help out. And a time came in my life, maybe 10 years ago, where I said, I wonder if the money is just muddying it. And I wonder if, I just intentionally care for my friends while they're caring for me, if that doesn't have to be a part of the equation. And so I just started inviting friends in for the sake of quality time and being together. And it led to some really beautiful things. And so now it's just friends helping friends, taking care of each other.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm interested. You used the word that the money was muddying things. You usually think of money as clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have to say, asking your friends to help, that doesn't simplify things. So.
Sure. Well, money does clarify things, but it clarifies things as a transaction, right? Yeah. And so then even just, setting aside whatever's going on in their own minds and hearts, just thinking about my own heart, my own mind, if I'm paying someone to do something, then there's a higher expectation in my own heart and mind where I say, well, we talk about this in the book. At one point, in college, I had a friend that would drive me to school every day. and he was paid for that. And yet I learned that he wasn't doing it to get paid. He was doing it because he loved me. But because he was getting paid, I got more demanding. I got more short with him. And I realized if we removed that aspect of things, if it was purely out of love and friendship on going in both directions, then I was more intentional to take care of them emotionally in the process, and it helped them in the long run. It was actually caring for them better.
Yeah. Y'all are probably familiar with now I can't even think of either the title of the book or the author. So this is going to get a little muddy.
You know that book.
But it's the one that talks about the market economy and the gift economy. And now I cannot believe it's just completely gone away from me.
Is it Bridges Over Poverty?
No.
Okay. That's
not it. Anyway, it's not going to come to.
Is it the pokey little puppy?
That's the one. Yeah. But what in a market economy, the whole idea of a transaction is we don't really have to be especially grateful to one another for one another because we've evened things out. And in an exchange, if I buy a pair of boots, I'm glad I got the boots, but I don't feel any particular attachment, or the whole point is I paid for my boots and I may be glad for the boots, but I don't really feel connected to the person who sold me the boots necessarily. Probably not. I mean, the whole point of that financial exchange is I don't have to be especially attached, especially grateful. It's very clean. Whereas in a gift economy, we are entangled.
Yeah.
Which we usually use that as a bad word. We don't want to be entangled. We don't want to be enmeshed.
Right. We don't want to be interdependent.
Yeah.
Well, so don't let me. I don't want to steer it in a direction you don't want to go. But could it be kind of like the difference between covenant and contract? Like in my premarital counseling and everything that I do with couples, I try to help them understand that marriage and the marriage vows, even specifically in the marriage ceremony, you are making vows of covenant, not terms of contract. Yeah, so when I say, all right, these are the things that I'm going to do as your husband, and it's not connected to if you do the things that you have to do as a wife. I'm going to do the thing. This is what I'm going to do as a husband. And then she says, well, these are the things I'm going to do as a wife. And it is that, so that covenant is, it is like interdependency, or at least it's a declaration that we're going to be interdependent. And so when it goes wrong is when a husband or a wife goes, well, you're not holding up your end, so I don't have to hold up my end.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not paying me for the services, and vice versa. So, yeah.
So that brings me to something that I've just started thinking about since you have been talking, Kevan and Tommy, and that is in the market economy, the whole point is we keep things even. Kevan, you part of the point of this book is that the hospitality of need means as you receive, you're also giving. As you receive the kind of care you need, you're also giving care, and you're giving people opportunity to serve, and people are receiving something from that. Can you speak to the idea of keeping it even, though?
Yeah. Well, and I do want to maybe add a little caveat, because I know there are a lot of people out there who are they make their living as a caregiver. They make their living as a nurse or
That's a great point.
It is still an important role. Just what I've found in my own life and my own situation is this. And so don't want to.
Well, you would find, though, that the very best professional caregivers, in-home healthcare workers, in-home nurses, the very best are the ones that allow themselves to genuinely love the person that they're caring for and not just receive it as a paycheck.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And so I
thanks for that clarification. I certainly didn't mean to belittle the work of, and by the way, not everybody's in a situation where they do have friends and loved ones who can take care of them.
Right. Yeah. And I think within that, I have another friend with cerebral palsy, and he does hire people to help him out with caregiving, and he has friends that help out too, unpaid. But the ones that he pays, he still sees that as an opportunity. They're coming into my home. How do I pay attention to them? How do I care for them? Yeah. So it is possible. I've just found in my own situation that stripping it back is easier and for everyone. So anyways, so what was the question? Sorry.
We were talking about, again, in the market economy, it's important that we keep things even, and it's as quickly as possible, right?
Yeah.
I pay for the boots, I get the boots.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, and I would say with a friendship economy, it is going to be, maybe not as clean cut, because you're dealing with less, concrete exchanges, because you're talking more about an emotional transaction, if you will. And so for me, I know that because, let's say, because Tommy comes in and helps me with the restroom, his full attention is on giving care to me. So I don't actually have to worry about myself in that moment. He knows how to take care of me. And so as a result, my full attention can be on how he's doing. I can pay attention to the body language that he brings into the room. I can pay attention to the tone in his voice, or I can remember it was his daughter's birthday yesterday and ask how the party went. My job is to look after him because he's looking after me. That's in the ideal kind of vacuum situation, that he may sit me down on the toilet and I say, "Oh, can you shift me this way?" That's going to happen. But in theory, I can turn my full attention to him and what's going on in his life.
Mm-hmm. But that's the beauty of just selflessness in every expression, is that when people are selfless, that frees up the people around them to not have to be selfish to get their needs met. So ideally, in a family, in a couple, in a culture where everyone is following Christ's example of selflessness, everyone gets their needs met and no one has to be selfish. They don't have to resort to selfishness to get any needs met, because everyone's free. Yeah, because everyone's giving of themselves.
Yeah, I love that language of freedom. What is freedom? How does freedom play into this idea of the hospitality of need as you bind yourself to other people?
Well, all right. So Kevin, if you don't mind, when Kevin, because Kevin and I have been talking for years about writing something together. We've had a couple other ideas we might circle back around to eventually, but they didn't quite, So when he approached me with this idea, I'm like, okay, yes, let's do it. Absolutely. Yes, I'm in. I'm here for it. Absolutely. But I knew in the back of my mind what it could end up meaning. Because I had, up until that point, I've been friends with Kevin for years, but I'd never actively participated in his caregiving. So I knew, okay, if I say yes to this project, this will probably mean that I'm going to need to assist Kevin in these ways that I'd never done before. And I remember even they were coming down to Florida, he and Katie, and Kevin just said, "Hey, while I'm down there, would you mind helping me with a shower?" And yes, let's do that. Absolutely. I've been so hoping you'd ask me. And I had to do a bit of a drive from where they were visiting in Sarasota, I think it was, Kevin. And the whole drive, I'm like, all right, Shelton, you talk a big game. I viewed it as almost like a price of entry. If you want to co-write this book with Kevin, you need to do this. Cost of doing business. 3 minutes, 45 seconds into getting over my embarrassment, because Kevin didn't have any, 45 seconds it took to get over the awkwardness of it. And I almost left that visit down in Sarasota going, oh, that's so frustrating, because I was going down there to be heroic. I was going down there to help. I was going down there. Yeah, you got a need, I'm going to meet it. And I left going, that blessed me more. That is so frustrating, because I was wanting to be selfless. I was wanting to earn the merit badge of selflessness and self-sacrifice. And it didn't cost me anything. It blessed me with it. So so then that first experience, and you go, several years out to right now, that same moment over and over and over again. And I feel indebted to him, for the invitation, for the opportunity. So I always talk too much, and I hope that answers the question. I think it spoke to the theme of whatever you asked, but
Well, and if I can piggyback off of that too, I think, I was mentioning earlier about paying attention to Tommy's needs in that moment. But then there are people that are nonverbal or really can't outwardly express a care for another. And there's days when I'm, I have more need, and it's super early in the morning. I really can't wake up to have the conversations that I normally would. And there's been times when Tommy steps into my need, 2 minutes before church starts, and I need help with something. It's really inconvenient. And yet, what I think Tommy's speaking to here is that something happens if we allow it. Something happens whether there is an obvious exchange or not. And maybe Tommy, you can speak more to that of what you experience. I'm guessing part of it, especially for men in our culture, giving a sense of ownership of I've been entrusted with this, even just that you've been entrusted with another person's bodily care or emotional care or whatever it may be. I mean, that can do profound things in each of us. And so and to go back to the beginning, I think an aspect of this book is addressing people who have obvious needs and they see them as a burden, and saying they don't have to be a burden. Maybe you're the only one seeing it that way, or maybe that's the narrative put on you, but it doesn't have to be that way. And then also speaking to those who want to step into need but aren't sure how, and saying, well, there are ways to connect with others through this.
Yeah. Can you talk to me, Kevin, about where that phrase "hospitality of need" comes from? It's a nice story.
Yeah. So a few years ago now, wow, it's been a while. I was sharing my testimony at my church, and I had a men's breakfast kind of thing. And traditionally afterwards, they all gather around and pray over the person that shared. And so they were praying over me, and a friend of mine who gets me up every Wednesday, he was here this week. It came time for him to pray, and he thanked God for giving me the gift of hospitality of need. And then he moved on, and I actually wasn't really sure what that meant, but I thought that it was a phrase that was worth sitting in and digging more into. And so over the next few weeks and months, I actually, in the morning when guys came and got me up and we were sitting there talking, I would ask them what I would just say, when I say this phrase, what do you think of? And so many of them just shared about how their time with me in the morning, because of my need, was a opportunity for us to grow closer and have a deeper relationship. For some of them, it's the only hour and a half or so of the week that is rhythmic and still and quiet, and so it cares for them in that way. And so realizing that, if in this book and in this conversation, if need was personified and standing on a stage, we could talk about, the color of its hair or the size of its shoes, but we could also talk about the attribute of hospitality that's in it. And so realizing that need is an opportunity for us to walk together into something great.
At one point in the book, actually, this actually may be the sort of afterword that you didn't write, but anyway, there's the idea that that need isn't just a lack, but it's a place. So it's really hard to get away from thinking of need as a lack. And what does that mean to say it's a place? You can think of it as a place instead of just a lack or an absence.
Tommy, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, so if we want to use place, it's like it's an empty room, and depending on your perspective, that's a problem or it's an opportunity. Like if it wasn't empty, it couldn't be filled. So need as an opportunity for something is a different perspective. Yeah, that even just joining in and writing the book has helped me understand that much better. Yeah. We want to be so autonomous and we want to be so self-sufficient. It's baked into us as fallen people. It's baked into us as a modern culture. We always see it as an obstacle to overcome, or we see it as a temporary problem that as soon as we can bootstrap it ourselves or get the temporary help to get over this particular moment or problem or obstacle, then we can go back to being who we're supposed to be, which is eminently capable and utterly unneeding of anybody else, anything else. We got it. Yeah. And as Christians, and I think we come by it honestly, because things are just so frustrating and complicated because of the fall and because of sin. I think we come to some of this, honestly, because we're fallen, so we get sick. We're fallen people. Since sin came into the world, we can now break a femur or have to have our appendix removed or something like that. So we're very familiar with lack, but I think inappropriately run straight to seeing that as a problem. That once solved, we can get back to being who we're meant to be. What if need was always meant to be a part of our existence, a part of our life together? You look at, Jesus's prayer in John 17, high priestly prayer, and I forgive the misquote if I do misquote it, but Jesus is saying, Father, may they be one as you and I are one. Like it's a kind of unity and a kind of oneness that is utterly alien to our default, mindset. And we can actually see need, like that empty room, as an opportunity to step into, get a little taste, a little appetizer, a little amuse-bouche of what the Lord intended our eternal life with Him, together with Him, with each other, in Him, with Him. The unity that baffles the mind.
Yeah. Tommy, I love the idea that that lack is an invitation, that an empty room is an invitation, it's an opportunity. And so I know we started by saying, let's don't think of need as a lack, but that's okay too, to think of it as a lack. And to acknowledge that the state of need and the state of dependence is not the exception for human experience, but the rule. And Jesus talks about coming to him as a little child. A child knows that it needs. And Kevan, when you start with, your book starts with the story of the paralytic whose friends let him down through the roof to the feet of Jesus to be healed. And you talk about the idea that you've had so many friends who have, taken you to the roof and let you down to the feet of Jesus, and yet you're not healed, right? You're still paralyzed. And that's a gift too. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Well, and that Jesus has two interactions with the man. He forgives him and forgives him of his sins, and he, then turns away for a minute and then comes back and heals him physically. And for that man, maybe it was 30 seconds or a minute. And for me, it's been 39 years and probably going to be longer. And yet what I have gotten to experience, as you mentioned, is being lowered to the feet of Jesus time after time, every morning, every midday restroom break, every time I need food cut up. But it's over and over, being lowered to the feet of Jesus by my friends, by my wife, by my parents, or my brother, or my sister, my family, and something that I have experienced myself is, as we've talked about, is they lower me to the feet of Jesus, but that means that those friends, maybe they were still on the roof looking through the hole, but that means they were right there. They were in proximity to Jesus as well. And so whether I'm, intentionally and clearly working on bringing them to the feet of Jesus, or it's just by his grace and mercy that they arrive there as well. By them participating, they are there in his presence too. And so I love that we get to experience that together over and over. I'm just thankful for that. And so, I'm not physically healed, and I don't know, I guess in some ways we can say that that's a gift, and in other ways I think we can say, well, that's just where we are, but at the end of the day, whatever the case, Jesus meets us there, and my friends and I can be there together. So I'm thankful for what we have.
Yeah. One thing that surprised me a little bit in this book is you spent a lot of time talking about Jesus's needs.
Yes, that was the that was the invitation that Kevan extended to me. He was telling me about the concept of the book, and I was like, "Hey, yes, great, go for it. That sounds awesome." And he said, "Well, I would like you to write some chapters on Jesus." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I've done some of that." And he goes, "But how Jesus had needs," and I'm like, "Okay, stands to reason. He was a man." Yeah. And then Kevan said, "And how he invited other people into his physical needs, into his needs, and as an invitation." He's like, "That's what I'm thinking," and I'm like, "Okay, sure." Well, so I wasn't going to turn down an invitation for to write with Kevan, but what I thought was going to be on the easier side of things, because I've preached a lot from the Gospels, ended up being just a monumental intellectual and spiritual wrestling match, because I just followed some steps logically and going, okay, Jesus had physical needs. He clearly did, because he was God in the flesh having needs.
and he needed those needs met. But when I got to the idea of God having a need, that was a real problem. Like, what do we do with this? Because part of what defines God by his very nature is that he doesn't need anything. He doesn't need anyone. He is complete in of himself. So what would it mean for God to have needs? And then I thought I came to a revelation, and it's like, oh, God didn't have to need, but he chose to need by, becoming incarnate as flesh, truly. I was like, yeah, that's it. That solves the problem. He chose to need. But then I go, okay, well, because God is sovereign, and he does according to his own will. So he has willed and he has purposed for the incarnation of Jesus. So if God has willed something, it needs to come to pass. So he needed to need. Like, is that still a need? So I'm talking to Kevan about it, and the theme of the whole long process of writing the book, Kevan just said, keep writing, keep writing, keep writing. And he would have thoughts and he would have counterpoints and things like that. And we did so much discussion. We kind of wish that audio was rolling the whole time during all those discussions. I'm sure we forgot some good stuff. But in getting to that problem, and I need to beg your forgiveness for an odd analogy. I was a big fan of the reboot of Battlestar Galactica. I thought it was back in the early 2000s. I thought it was a brilliantly written show. And the writer said that what he does as a writing team is he purposely writes the show into a corner because it gives them no easy out. Like, they write themselves in a corner, so then they have to write themselves out of it. So it's like, whether we did it intentionally or not, the Lord clearly did. I felt like I was kind of written into a corner. Okay, God willed that Jesus have need that needs to be met. He's a man in the flesh. He needs to drink water. He needs to eat food. He needs to sleep. Why? And what does that mean? So the whole writing of it was an exploration of that, and seeing how Jesus used, those were opportunities. Like, if Jesus just came as the image of a man to not startle us, it wouldn't be incarnation, right? It would be like just good marketing or just good PR, like he had to really truly need a drink of water, but he used that true need to bless other people. So then let's go, okay, that's the pattern that he established. That's the standard that that's the example that he gave, is you have need. There's no way around it. You will die if you don't drink water. Kevin's going to die if his needs aren't met. And you can see them as burdens, or you can see them as opportunities. And I think
also,
one
Tommy,
is
you
right
and I will die
one
if we
is
don't have
wrong.
our needs met, right?
Well, truly, yeah. So it's just on a spectrum, like we're just just a couple ticks on the scale to slightly more autonomy, but in the grand scheme of things, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. I love the chapter titles. The fountain needed a drink, the spotless lamb needed a wash, the way needed a ride. That was really good stuff.
Yeah. Well, that was fun. It was, we fell into that accidentally. I think all the chapters had other titles, and then one of them was like that. Like, we named one of them like the fountain needed a drink or something like that. And then we kind of thought, what if we could go with that as a theme?
Yeah. Well, as y'all know, this is a podcast that's a lot of writers listen to, a lot of people who do creative work. So I was hoping we're going to have to sort of work through this together, because I sprung it on y'all and I don't have it thought out myself. But, I often talk about the importance for a writer to think of their work as an act of hospitality, whether that's in fiction, inviting a reader into a scene, or in nonfiction, well, for that matter, in nonfiction too. I think it's really helpful to think in terms of hospitality. I'm setting a table for people. I am creating space for them. And I want to talk about how the hospitality of need relates to that idea of creative work as an act of hospitality. So, Kevin, you had 10 minutes to think about it before we started. So what you come
Yeah.
10 whole minutes.
I'm not sure Tommy even had that much time to think about it.
Right. Well, we
At about 3.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 minutes. Yeah, so he's good. He's all good. Yeah, we have a few thoughts on this, but I would just like to and Tommy had a really great analogy that I'll let him share, but I wanted to start by saying, this book is an example of that, writing with hospitality in mind and writing with the hospitality of need in mind, because well, first off, how weird would it be for me to write a whole book essentially about friendship in a vacuum? I felt like, well, this is just, I shouldn't write this by myself. That would contradict what the book is about. Because sure, in some weird ways, it would have been, it would have been my book, and I could have written it at my own pace, and I could have, made all the decisions by myself, and I would have all this control. But that's not friendship. And so I wanted the book to look like friendship. And so that's one aspect. The other aspect is, and maybe I could have written what we'll call the Jesus chapters. I could have written some semblance of them, but they wouldn't have been as good. And I have always loved Tommy's preaching and the way that he holds scripture and what he does with it, and or what he lets it do to him and to his congregation. And so I needed him to write them. I needed someone to write them, and I wanted it to be him. And then I needed all these friends to inspire me to write it. All these stories about my life wouldn't have existed without all these friends, and so I needed them. And then, of course, the editing process and the formatting. I'm not going to do any of that, and so I think a writer can't do everything, and we can either see that as a frustration, or we can see it as an opportunity for the book to take shape in a really beautiful way.
I think one thing that may be relevant here, I bet you will have something interesting to say about this, Kevin and Tommy. The position of the writer, in important respects, is a position of authority, right? So, Kevin, you writing about the hospitality of need, I'm willing to read that. I'm interested because you have the authority to speak to those topics. Authority, in some ways, feels like the opposite of need. It feels like the opposite of vulnerability. But on the other hand, one of the reasons that I believe your authority is because you were willing to say, hey, I've got to get my friends to help me on the toilet. And I've got to get my friends to help me take a shower. And that's a very vulnerable thing to say, to put in print. I mean, at this point in your life, I know you've said it enough that you're used to the idea, but still, right? Sure. I mean, it's you didn't leave that vague. You didn't leave that abstract or ambiguous. That seems to me like an interesting, that there's something there about the connection between the hospitality of need and actually gaining authority by being honest and vulnerable. Do you have anything to say in response to that?
Well, I'm reminded of what Hemingway said, that didn't he say writing is easy? You just sit down at your typewriter and bleed. It's like you have to, in some sense, you have to put your heart on the paper. And this book, as a side note, I'll say it was hard. It was hard to write because, when I wrote We Carry Kevan years ago, it was about a 3-week time. The book is about a 3-week period of life.
Right. Yeah.
And it harkens to other moments, but it's really a concentrated moment with a concentrated, 6 friends. Mm-hmm. It's very specific. And this covers my whole life and so many different friendships from different seasons and walks of life. And so it was hard. I mean, I would say it still is hard now that it's out in the world to say, oh, wow, now everyone knows about that conversation or about that intimate moment with this friend. And, it's, you're really putting yourself out there, and not to say everyone should go out and write a memoir, airing everything that they've ever experienced. But I just share that to say it is a heavy thing to do. And there were whole chapters that got rewritten or thrown out, not because a friend said. Actually, all the friends that I wrote about in the book gave permission, and they all even said, I don't need to read it to approve it. I trust you. And I know that our friendship could bless others. And so it was purely on my end of saying, no, I want to keep that part private. I want to honor this friend in this way. And it was, lost a lot of sleep and had a lot of, I would write a chapter. It would take a week or two, and then I would take a month off from the book because it had taken so much emotionally out of me. And yet, what you said is I hope true, that people will read the book and they'll see the vulnerability and they'll say, oh, so when you're talking about need and you're talking about the hospitality of need, you have authority on it. Or at least I'm going to listen to you because I can see that it's real, and so that is the end goal with this book. And so but then you have people that write fiction and or they write historical something, it's a little more distanced, and yet there is a sense of vulnerability because they are, at the end of the day, your words. They are your thoughts. Even if you've researched, you're still compiling them in your own way, and you have to say, I'm willing to share this. I'm willing to be vulnerable. And as a result, people are hopefully blessed by that. So that's the hospitality of it. But you also are blessed because now, you've got that off of your back. You're not the only one carrying it anymore. And you're, by writing a book, you're inviting people into that thought. And it can be a great picture of a great and weird picture of community,
Yeah. Well, you really honored your friends in this book, and you especially love the way you honored your wife, Katie.
Thanks.
So that was really, really lovely. All right, we got to wrap this thing up. I want to hear y'all talk about who are the writers who make you want to write. We'll start with you, Tommy.
On the theological nonfiction side, I love the writing of John Piper because he's so theologically rich, but he's so clearly very tender and very passionate, and that comes through very clearly in his writing. And he labors over his words, not to make them complicated or impressive, but he labors over the words that he uses to give them the appropriate weight. So I really admire his writing. On the fiction side, which I don't read much, but my grandmother loved Louis L'Amour Western fiction. So about one a year, I received, because I asked if I could have them. My grandmother owned every book that Louis L'Amour wrote, and I have that entire collection. So I read about one a year. Some really good cowboy fiction. It's just so fun to get into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Kevan, what do you got?
Oh man. Well, I would say Walter Wangerin is a big one for me. I love his stuff. I feel like he helped me through his books to realize what was important to share. This book in particular was really inspired. The format of it was inspired by Frederick Buechner, and just the way that he would shape his storytelling. I drew a lot of inspiration from that. When I grew up writing short stories and making up comic books and stuff, and played in a band. But after college, I read a book by Walter Moors, who was he is a German cartoonist, and some of his books have been translated into English, and he just writes like these goofy fantasy kind of very cartoony stories. And I remember reading his book and the 13 and a half Lives of Captain Blue Bear, and just felt like he stepped out of the book and said, hey, you can tell your stories too. So that's a big one. And last of all, G.K. Chesterton has really helped me understand how to be bold in what I know is important to share. So I really love his stuff. And when I read him and J.M. Barrie and any guys from that era, that early 1900s British writing, fiction or nonfiction, I can't get through a book or a chapter without chomping at the bit to write something myself. So,
love it.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. It's been great to talk to you, and I love learning more about your friendship. And I so love this book, Kevan and Tommy. So thanks for writing it.
Thank
you.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. Special thanks as well to Taylor Leonard for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorleonard.com. The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.